Please welcome President of Goldwyn Global Strategies and non-resident Senior Fellow and Chairman, Energy Advisory Group, Global Energy Center, Atlantic Council, David Goldwyn.
Greetings, everyone. We're going to talk about Western Hemisphere and energy today, and we could not have a better candidate to talk to us about this than Assistant Secretary Caleb Orr. You've got a big portfolio. You've got your Assistant Secretary for Economics, Energy, and Business, and I know you've been with Secretary Rubio for many years. So tell me a little bit about how you're managing your portfolio and what you're spending your time on these days.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here at the Atlantic Council, and some great panels before talking all about the Western Hemisphere and the great production that we're seeing throughout the hemisphere. And really, it's a transformative opportunity here in the Trump administration to work with our partners and allies throughout the region to generate energy security that advances our national security strategy. I've worked for Secretary Rubio for many years, first starting when he was a senator, and then came over where I'm now honored to serve President Trump and Secretary Rubio at the State Department. And President Trump's national security strategy really gives us the lodestar for how we think about energy security in the hemisphere, which is that the Western Hemisphere really should be a source of strength for the United States. For too many years, we have neglected the region, and we've allowed a lot of problems to fester. That manifests itself mostly in security matters, drugs and illegal migration. But really, we're focused on fixing those. But ultimately, we want the region to be a source of strength for the United States and really for broad-based prosperity throughout the region. The United States really can benefit from growing energy production throughout the region, and we think that our partners in the region also can benefit from increasing and diversifying their sources of revenue, and ultimately creating more affordable energy to power the nearshoring that the Trump administration is executing.
That's great. Well, let's dig down on Western Hemisphere, because certainly Canada, Brazil, Guyana have been big sources of production, but is it really the strategy of the administration to promote investment in these other countries and to grow it? And how does that fit with the energy dominance agenda, which we heard this morning is also focused on growing U.S. production?
Absolutely. Well, the Western Hemisphere doesn't become as critical of a region as it has become for energy without the United States leading the way. And truly, there's nothing like the energy miracle that we have seen under President Trump in the United States. And frankly, like with many policy areas, the United States is a model for countries throughout the region, and other countries look to us and how we do our energy production to see how they can also follow. And so President Trump unleashing the United States energy dominance really leads the way for the region to follow. But in total, the United States produces roughly half of the total oil in the region as a whole, and the rest of the region is also growing. And I think in a lot of countries where production has been stagnant for too long, you're now seeing some very rapid gains. And this is really a part of the broader shift in the region that President Trump has inaugurated with the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, where we are really leaning into working with our partners and really starting from a presumption that the region should be aligned with the energy policies of the United States. And so because of the aligned political leadership in other countries, like Argentina, for example, you're starting to see some immense investments in upstream production. And even in countries like Brazil, you're seeing really significant increases in production, because I think countries throughout the region have seen how the United States has led the way and understand that they can also benefit from really investing in their upstream. And so we really are excited to see the increased numbers throughout the region. I was just looking at it, at the time of the Arab oil embargo in the 1970s, the Arab states producing oil produced about 36% of total global production. And here today, the Western Hemisphere is sitting at 32% and growing every year. And so really, when you look at the new geography of energy production, the Western Hemisphere is one of the key theaters. And precisely because of the increased political support and the very close coordination that the United States has with our allies in the region, we have the ability to work with them and to coordinate what we're doing when it comes to production and investment to really drive the future of energy trends and the destinations of where this energy is headed.
So let's talk about some of the areas where you see significant growth. Maybe let's start with Guyana. I know you're spending some time on Guyana. What's the outlook there, and how is the U.S. engaging to support Guyana in its development as an oil producer?
It's been amazing to see the production increases in Guyana. Our Undersecretary Jacob Hellberg was just in Georgetown. Secretary Rubio's been to Georgetown. We've given Guyana a lot of attention, and we expect we will continue to do so because we view Guyana as a key partner, not only for increasing energy production in the region, but showing how energy can be a cornerstone of beneficial growth and broad-based prosperity. So we're working with Guyana to continue to increase the production. I mean, sitting right now, I think at 930,000 barrels a day, and is headed, north of 1 million very soon. Guyana really is one of the brightest stars in the world when it comes to where new production is coming online. But they also stand to benefit from this, and we're working closely with them to ensure that the revenues that they're generating, are going to purposes that will help their economy grow and ultimately make Guyana into a full-fledged economic partner of the United States. In areas spanning energy production, but also other industrial areas.
And some of the other, the North American powerhouses, both Canada and Mexico. Can you talk a little bit about our engagement there, and are we as sort of enthusiastic about investment and production in those countries as we are in Guyana and Argentina?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Canada and Mexico are obviously key parts of our energy agenda as well. We are currently in the process of reviewing the USMCA agreement with Canada and Mexico. Security matters take the forefront, of those relationships, especially in places like Mexico. But the energy component is really critical as well. With Canada and Mexico, the pipelines and the transmission infrastructure become very important as well. Not only do you have the upstream component, but you have the pipelines, and the amount of energy that we import, from Canada is a very important component. We've had some significant trade disputes with Canada recently, but at the end of the day, we still see very significant energy transmissions, and President Trump has been very forward-leaning on approving new infrastructure construction across the Canadian border, and so we expect that will continue to occur. We no longer have the days where pipelines will be held up, in interminable reviews, because at the end of the day, in order to be energy dominant, we need to tap the resources wherever they are, including in Canada and Mexico. And so, we think that energy infrastructure and pipeline infrastructure is a key part of both our relationships in energy with Canada and Mexico. And we want to, there's some exciting projects on the Mexican border as well to expand the amount of energy that we are sending to Mexico. I think that one of the underappreciated components of the current energy market moment is just how geographically distributed, for example, natural gas prices are. And so the Western Hemisphere really stands to benefit from its geographic proximity to the United States. And that's something that the national security strategy of the Trump administration also recognizes, which is that you can't wish away geography, and in a lot of ways, geography is destiny. And we want to make that a reality in our energy markets as well, because at the end of the day, we are really supporting a lot of nearshoring, to the Western Hemisphere to bring critical supply chains closer to home, to make for more resilient critical supply chains. And in order to have industrial production at scale, you need cheap energy. You need affordable energy. And so increasing Mexico in particular's access to affordable U.S. energy, and frankly other places in Central America that have existing LNG capacity is very important to our reshoring agenda.
That's great. Well, I think it's going to be good news for a lot of the folks in the audience. We're spending a lot of time talking about USMCA, hoping that energy trade remains tariff-free. Mexico, our primary destination for both natural gas and for products. So it's encouraging to hear the State Department perspective on that. Hopefully your friends at USTR are picking up on that as well. Venezuela has certainly been in the news, and I know a huge area of focus for you and, of course, the rest of the administration. A lot of talk about what a big opportunity it is, but also some of the near-term challenges. So people talked about inflation, access to capital, the ability of the existing investors to get their debts paid, getting the regulations clarified, international arbitration, things like that. There's a long list of issues. So what's the perspective of the administration on the current framework, and what are some of the tools you all are using to try and help Venezuela become competitive?
That's a fantastic question, and Venezuela really stands out as one of the great foreign policy successes of the Trump administration. And President Trump, took decisive action to stabilize Venezuela and really make Venezuela into the partner of the United States that by all rights, by geography, by culture, by economic ties, that it should be of the United States. And we're now just over 5 months since January 3rd, and we're making a lot of progress. I think we're helping Venezuela recover not only its oil sector, but its entire economy after it's suffering through over 20 years of socialism. So we're on the right track. We are fully engaging with Venezuela. We have a delegation actually right down in Caracas right now from the State Department and the other partners in the interagency. And we are helping Venezuela really get back connected into the Western economy, and that's true in all respects. Not only in the oil sector, in terms of getting our companies and other companies back in to the upstream, but also when it comes to modernizing regulations to get back up to speed for where the modern regulatory climate is, but also in the financial sector. Venezuela has a lot of natural strengths. It has a fantastic people, and they've got a lot of history of being a major oil producer and, frankly, a very wealthy country. And we are really working closely with them to get them back to where they should be by all rights. And President Trump has really set us in a solid position to do so.
That's great. And I guess the new regulations come out, new comments come out. There's a little bit of an iterative process. If you can take us behind the curtain a little bit, how sort of hands-on is the U.S. government in helping the Venezuelans understand that some of the details of these terms, like arbitration or too much flexibility from the ministry, are you all really digging deep on framework, or is this more at the 50,000-foot level?
Look, the Venezuelan government and the interim authorities there, they understand exactly, what is in their interest, which is to expand oil production, to get Venezuela back to being the real powerhouse when it comes to oil and gas production that it historically has been. And so the government there deserves a lot of credit for being so forward-leaning and for really, taking a very forward-looking and far-sighted approach to introducing new reforms in their legislation and their regulations. So we're in constant contact with them and with our industry to make sure that the process is going in a way that works both for Venezuela's interests, because at the end of the day, we want this to be a productive partnership. We want the message to be that when you partner with the United States, you benefit, you prosper, your people prosper. But also, is one that works for our companies and can really drive a lot of progress on the ground. So, to answer your question, yes, we're very much in the details, but it's definitely a collaborative relationship, and we really have enjoyed a very close working relationship with the senior leadership of the Venezuelan government to push progress. And I think you're seeing some of the results. I mean, the estimated GDP growth statistics are really tremendous. I mean, we're looking at double-digit growth this year at the low end of the estimate. I mean, some private industry estimates have it significantly higher. We're seeing inflation decline in Venezuela. The previous, year-over-year inflation was 500 or 600%. You're now seeing inflation fall to 10% and below month over month. And so you're really seeing the kind of progress that I think if you had scripted it up after January 3rd and you said, where will you be 5 months from now? I think we're meeting those metrics at the right pace, and we're seeing a lot of progress.
That's great. I mean, people focus on the oil, but natural gas is really important, and it's really important to Trinidad. I don't know if you want to say a word about the licensing that you all have supported to develop gas development for helping Trinidad.
I really can't say enough positive about Trinidad. I mean, they have been a truly excellent partner in all matters, and we're really thrilled to continue working with them. I think there's some great opportunities coming forward, as we have gone on this path of normalizing with Venezuela, I think Trinidad will continue to be a close partner going forward.
Great. Critical minerals, I know, is an important part of your portfolio. You have the critical minerals ministerial. Can you paint a picture for us? What's the strategy on critical minerals, and is it too early to tell where we think growth will come from in terms of actual new supply of these minerals to the United States?
Critical minerals is another foundational component of the administration's energy security strategy. We were in a situation last year where we were reliant on one country for over 90% of critical components, and so the administration has really taken an all-of-the-above approach to looking at critical minerals, and really it's the full supply chain. Just like how oil and gas really plays a key role in our diplomacy because so much of the reserves are located abroad. In a similar manner, the reserves of many of the minerals on our critical minerals list are also located abroad. But really the geographies that Latin America contain many of the minerals that we need. And so an approach to critical minerals that focuses on hemispheric sovereignty can really go a long way to establishing the resilient supply chains that we want to see in critical minerals. And so you've got, in a lot of countries, you've got a long legacy of some very fantastic mining operations, especially when it comes to copper and gold mining. But we want to see not only, greater U.S. interest and U.S. ownership in the upstream sector, but also in processing and refining, which is where a lot of the bottleneck is in the current critical minerals markets. So I think critical minerals is one where it's another area where you've seen this narrative play out over time, where the United States has for too long neglected the Western Hemisphere, and so you've seen other actors come into the Western Hemisphere and start to dominate some of its very rich natural resources. And with President Trump and the Trump administration and our national security strategy, we're really taking a fresh approach and saying, no, the United States really should be involved. This is something that is in our interest, that this development happen in a way that is sustainable from a growth perspective and benefits the people of the countries in Latin America. And so we're taking that fresh look. But we're also saying, how can they move up the value chain? We recognize that there's so many critical minerals where we are currently reliant on other countries outside of our hemisphere, that in order to meet the needs that we have in the time frame that we're operating on, which is this administration, we don't have the benefit of handpicking the perfect locations for all of this capacity. And so we want to do something that's pro-market. We want to do something that works economically. And so that's going to look like having a lot of processing and refining facilities located throughout the region. In the United States, of course, and there's some promising developments here. But in Mexico, in Chile, in Brazil, in Argentina, all of these are countries that are moving forward very aggressively on critical minerals processing in a way that we think will be very helpful.
So just to understand that a little bit more, the U.S. traditionally hasn't had a lot of big mining companies that are interested in going overseas. So is most of our comparative advantage here sort of on the financing side to help U.S. and other companies build processing facilities so they stand them up quicker?
Yeah, that's right. Australia, the UK, Canada, the Toronto Stock Exchange has many of these mining companies that have been very successful. I think two things. So number one, I work at the State Department. We do foreign policy. We like working with our allies and partners in the UK and elsewhere, and so we're very happy to work with those mining companies. And the DFC, Ben Black spoke earlier today. I know the DFC has been very active too, where we'll work with an ally or a partner country or one of their companies and secure the U.S. governance rights through the DFC. And so the DFC has been a really critical partner in taking the existing market institutions and the companies and converting it into something that has more U.S. governance. At the same time, I think you're seeing a lot of exciting mining startups who recognize the market realities and the current super cycle that we are in, and recognize a very, very profitable opportunity with respect to startups. And so I think you're going to see more U.S. companies coming online over time. And then finally, there are some legacy Latin American companies that are fantastic to work with as well, and who really want to work with the U.S. and welcome components like DFC financing. So yes, I think to answer your question, the financing is probably where you start, but we're seeing a lot of interesting progress in developing our own operational capacity as well.
Fantastic. Trade is a responsibility sort of USTR, but the foreign policy interest in a free open trading system, is something the State Department cares a lot about. And then we've also got the affordability agenda. People are really concerned about the price of everything. So, there's been some back and forth, I guess, over the last couple of years as to whether or not there are going to be tariffs on things like commodities. So far, the answer seems to be no. Commodities are pretty open. But then the components may be subject to tariffs, which are the things, the pipes and everything else, compressors, transformers that people need. How is the administration thinking about balancing these two agendas over the rest of the term, especially as we're starting to see some of these trade agreements come up for renewal?
Look, I think it really depends on the kind of commodity and what the market analysis is for what we produce in the United States. I mean, President Trump is America first, and we are driving domestic production as much as we possibly can. At the same time, there are critical components in commodities where you have a truly global market and you have so much production outside the United States, and when it's in countries that work with us on all sorts of other matters, it makes a lot of sense to really prioritize those countries and make them stable sources of supply. So I think it really depends on the commodity, and you've certainly seen that with the Section 232 process on various components and commodities. The other thing I would add, just to keep the conversation on critical minerals, is that USTR is currently running a process that Ambassador Greer announced at the Critical Minerals Ministerial that Secretary Rubio hosted in February to create a price floor for critical minerals to help drive healthier markets in critical minerals. Because the problem that we've seen, because of China's dominance of the critical minerals marketplace, is that you have a totally upside down market where, for example, in copper, you have basically negative cost rates, where refiners are basically paying the suppliers to take their product and refine it for them. That's not a market in which you can expect to have, in a capitalist system, a healthy rate of return. And so you're not going to see investment in the processing and refining. And so what USTR is negotiating, with some key allies and partners, is a trade agreement that imposes a price floor for critical minerals, so that we don't have this kind of upside down subsidized market, and you can actually have Western investment in the critical minerals processing and refining. And so it's not only a question of keeping certain key commodities tariff free in order to maintain our access. It's also about, for some of these critical minerals that are essential to our defense supply chain and industrial supply chain, keeping a pro-market and pro-investment tariff that can really drive investment. And, if you're an upstream producer, and right now, you're selling to China, you're going to get a windfall if you sell into the United States with a price floor, because you'll have a much bigger price. And if you're a processor, you're going to be able to rest assured that you're competing on a market that's set at a healthy level and not going to be competing against subsidized competition.
Great. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I was going to ask you about the Caribbean. We just had a panel on the Caribbean, and the Atlantic Council has a soft spot for the Caribbean, and people have thought about it as certainly as a region that uses a lot of fuel oil and diesel, a potential for natural gas. Relatively small markets, but we've got floating storage and floating platforms that can sort of provide that accessibility. Does the administration see the Caribbean as a strategic area? One where there's Chinese competition to be supported, and are there any programs or plans to sort of engage the Caribbean in their energy security?
Absolutely. The Caribbean is a key national security theater, and we think it is an asset for the United States that is just waiting to be developed. Secretary Rubio was in St. Kitts earlier this year. Again, I think Secretary Rubio is setting travel records for the region, for secretaries of state going to the region. And we want to make the Caribbean a major focus. We think that their economies really could benefit from cheaper energy that the United States stands ready to provide. And so LNG is a great resource for them. I was just in Honduras and El Salvador, where we're working on expanding the LNG capacity for imports there. But that's true throughout the region. And really, when you look at it, just as a matter of geography, it's a region that the United States really stands to benefit from. It's a region that's suffered from a lot of security challenges. But again, President Trump taking the security challenges seriously and taking the steps to really clean up and make for a safer and more secure environment is the table stakes for creating a more prosperous economy. And so once we've taken care of these security matters, we have the ability to help companies make the kind of long-term investments they need to make to drive a more prosperous Caribbean. And a lot of the islands in the Caribbean, they may have unexplored resources that can be oil and gas. Frankly, we're seeing more and more because of the interest in critical minerals. We're hearing about deposits and reserves in countries that previously had never really explored it because the pricing. Again, you're looking at copper and gold prices. It's at or above all-time highs, and so. A lot of these Caribbean countries, really stand to benefit, and they have, if they were able to develop these resources, would really generate new revenue streams that could help their economies grow and invest in some creative new industries.
Great, thank you. Well, we're out of time. Let's have a hand for Assistant Secretary Caleb Orr. Thanks for a great conversation.
Yeah.